Right, guys, so here we are again. So, what I've been thinking about a lot, and I guess recently kind of finishing my course and having finished with practice clients, all the friends and family I could kind of rope into spending some time with me in coaching is now that I'm out in the real world, how do I get more clients?
Ooh, the big one.
The big one that obviously it pops up all the time in a lot,
Yeah.
so I'm sure a lot of people will benefit from this one. What do you reckon?
Right. I think we can go into lots of different places with this, right? So let's try to... you said something earlier that I really liked about this in terms of when you think about how to get clients, because there are so many different ways of how you could approach this, you were thinking, how do I get my next client, right?
Yeah.
Do you want to say a bit more about that to start with? Because I think it's a really good one angle, because I'm sure we're going to come back to this question a bunch of times as we're going through this kind of thing, but do you want to say a bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. And this is something that one of my early coaches, mentors taught me. Because for me, I was always looking, for, for a bunch of clients. I was looking for the next 5 clients, the next 10 clients, right? And he asked me, "Where's your next client?"
Mm-hmm.
And he asked me to think in singular rather than plural. And it just made such a big difference because I slowed down. And I think this is so useful because there are so many people around us, right? So many people that can actually, so many people that can benefit from coaching, but we're just so fast. And I love this. I love this analogy that he gave me. He said, "Look, imagine you're on a train, and you have clients that you can work with on another train, but your train is just going so much faster. You can't see anyone on the other train." And he said, "Just slow down and focus on one person and create that connection." Right? So anyone that's really struggling with this, how do I get more clients? Just slow down and think about the next person.
So what's a good way to get that next person? What would a coach need to do or think about or ask themselves in order to find that next one? Because I think that's really good advice because that narrows it down.
Yeah.
What do we do to find the next one?
Well, for me it's about, I think it's about presence. Because once I'm present, I meet people everywhere. Often because we're so fast, we miss that. So just to give you an example, I went to an event a few months ago and I met someone and we briefly had a conversation and I asked her like, how's your coaching going? And she said something and normally I would probably have overlooked that.
So
right?
She was asking you, how's your coaching going?
No, I asked her.
Ah, right,
how's
so
your
she
coaching
knew she
going?
was a coach.
Yeah. And I think this is something very common, right? That if you have a conversation with people, even a basic conversation about like how's work going or how's things going at home, people usually when they say something, if you're present, you can see their emotions, you can see what's going on for them. You can see, maybe you can hear the tone of voice.
So you pick
Right,
up on
and
the subtleties.
When we are present, we can pick up so much. From our friends, from our family, but also from colleagues at work. Even maybe the person behind the desk, or behind the cashier, right, in a local supermarket. And I've met so many clients like that. So this one, for example, at an event, I just asked her how things are going, and she was like, "Yeah, it's all right." Well, I sensed it wasn't all right, right, and allowed that conversation to become a bit more deeper by being present. And personally, I believe really as well. It's not so much a belief, but I think it's useful to not start coaching, in that moment, because a little bit like a doctor wouldn't necessarily say, "Hey, okay, lift your shirt up, let me have a look," right? I think as a coach, it's useful to build that connection and see maybe that there is something to work on or there's something that you can help that person with, but then I like to take that conversation away from that place. So
how do you make that step? Because like I think it's probably easy for a lot of people watching this to say, oh yeah, I have good conversations all the time, or maybe there's some, and we can talk about this another time, how we create those conversations. But like, if you start talking to people and you're really present, and you pick up that somebody's maybe not so alright, or somebody mentions something that we feel is very connected to the coaching work that we do, and we're like, oh, I think I could really help this person. How do you then take the next step to getting into the coaching, as you say, you know, to offer them to come see me in the doctor's office, so to speak, you know, like, oh, you should make an appointment. You know, it could be as simple as that, but like, how do you, what are ways to take the conversation to a coaching conversation?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and I think what I've learned from experience is that I want to keep the initial connection short, because often what's happened is, you know, people, there's a great conversation, and they're like, hey, I gotta run. And you don't want to like run after them and say, hey, by the way, here's my card, or what's your number. So I like to keep it short, and after a few minutes and say, hey, you know what, I really like this conversation, what about we continue this conversation over a cup of coffee. So for me it's always about, and I also pay attention to language. See, in the beginning I was always using the word coaching. I don't use that word too much, and it's not like a bad or negative word, but often people become a bit more hesitant when you say, hey, what about we have a coaching session, or
it's like, oh, you want my money,
or even or even words like, let's have a discovery session, or you know, a strategy session, right? So I just like to use the word conversation. It's very neutral. Hey, what about we continue a conversation? Sometimes it's a cup of coffee, tea, or hey, what about we get on a call?
So fast forward, you would have that conversation, then you meet up for a coffee after you've connected at a conference, or in the bus, or like in the coffee shop, or at a party, or whatever, and you have that coffee. And for me, looking at that, I could imagine that person is quite perhaps quite ignorant that you're a coach. You know, ignorant as in they're not aware. They're just, oh, we had a connection and now we're continuing the conversation. You know, at what point do you take that next step to, I'm actually doing this for a living, do you want to enter a professional relationship?
Yeah, so I think there's different ways of doing it, right? I don't think there's, well, there are probably some things that are wrong and some things that are more right, but I like to find what's in between, what works for me.
Let's say what works better and what doesn't work so well, right?
Exactly, and I think as a coach we have to also find what's working for us. I found myself in the past where I spent 2 hours with someone and they still had no idea I was a coach, so I don't like doing that anymore, right? You know, I like to play my cards open on the table, and I think that's something that I learned early on, and I think that's something I would encourage coaches, you know, be upfront, be transparent. So often it's if in between those, for example, in between that initial meeting and the actual coaching session, I usually get in touch with them and say, hey, would it, and not so much about like, don't tell them necessarily what to do, but I ask them to show up in a certain way. So if it's,
to that coffee, to that second meeting.
Yeah, so if it's, for example, if it's on the call or on Skype or Zoom, I ask them to be present. I ask them to be in a quiet place, right? And really to take that time out for them.
Right, so this is the second meeting after you've connected?
Yeah, so you could call it the first meeting, right?
Yeah.
But
like the first encounter?
The actual first session.
Right, okay.
I do like to kind of...
Is that the coffee that you were talking about?
Yeah.
To continue the conversation?
Yeah. You know, so I think the initial connection is important.
Yeah.
To, you know, of course you want to exchange details.
Right.
And again, also there, I personally don't do business cards.
Right.
And the reason is because it's almost like giving away, you know, your power. Because I like to be proactive. Because if you can give away 100 business cards and wait around for someone to call you, right? So I like to be proactive there, exchange details, and then get in touch straight away. Hey,
yeah, or put a meeting in the calendar. It's like, hey, should we continue this conversation? How about next Tuesday?
Exactly.
I'm free between 2 and 6.
Exactly, and I think it's really important to just build that relationship straight away. Hey, it's nice meeting you. I really liked, you know, what you were talking about, and you know, let's have that. Look forward to our next conversation.
Hey guys, if you enjoyed that, you know what to do. Hit subscribe and send us a question. See you next time.